a print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, March 22nd. Your reader for the first hour will be Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Ron Bickelman. And now, a look at the weather for the week. Periods of rain today and cooler during the afternoon with a high of 49, a couple of showers during the evening, otherwise cloudy tonight and a low of 31. Colder to start out the work week on Monday with a high of 36 and a low of 22 and a possible snow shower in the morning. Tuesday would be more clouds and intervals of sunshine with a high of 39 and a low of 31. The temperatures keep getting warmer, though it could be a snow shower in the morning on Wednesday with a high of 42 and a low of 32. The rain returns for Thursday with a little afternoon rain with a high of 50 and a low of 31. Friday, it'll be mostly cloudy and colder with a high of 39 and a low of 25. And through the weekend, the cold remains with it being mostly sunny and a high of 34 and a low of 30. And now, here's our first story. Iran fires missiles farther than ever, own nuclear site hit. Britain condemned Iran for targeting a joint UK-US base in the Indian Ocean, and Iran's main nuclear enrichment site was struck again as the war in the Middle East entered its fourth week. Iran's attack on the Diego Garcia Air Base, about 2,500 miles away, suggested Tehran has missiles that can go farther than it had previously acknowledged, or that it had used its space programs for an improvised launch. Iran's capital saw heavy airstrikes overnight and into the morning, residents said, as thousands of worshippers converged on Tehran's Grand Mosque for prayers marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said attacks would increase significantly in the coming week. He spoke shortly after fragments from an Iranian missile slammed into an empty kindergarten near Tel Aviv. No casualties were reported. The attacks and threats of more to come indicate the war shows no sign of abating, as its effects are felt far beyond the Middle East, raising food and fuel prices. The U.S. and Israel have offered shifting rationales for the war, from hoping to foment an uprising that topples Iran's leadership to eliminating its nuclear and missile programs and its support for armed proxies in the region. There have been no public signs of any uprising, while internet restrictions in Iran complicate communications. With little information coming out of Iran, it's not clear how much damage its arms, nuclear, or energy facilities have sustained in the punishing U.S. and Israeli assaults that began February 28th, or even who is truly in charge. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei has not been seen in public since he was named to the role. And Israel's denying responsibility. Iran's official news agency, Mizan, said there was no leakage after the strike on the Natanz nuclear facility, nearly 135 miles southeast of Tehran. The UN nuclear watchdog has said the bulk of Iran's estimated 970 pounds of enriched uranium is elsewhere, beneath the rubble of its Isfahan facility, with a lesser amount at Natanz. Israel's military said it was, quote, not aware of a strike by it there. The International Atomic Energy Agency said on X, formerly Twitter, it was informed by Iran about the strike and was looking into the incident. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said such strikes posed a real risk of catastrophic disaster throughout the Middle East. The Natanz facility was hit in the first week of the war, and several buildings appeared damaged, according to satellite images. Natanz was also targeted in the 12-day war last June. And there has been an attempted airbase strike. Britain's Ministry of Defense said Saturday that Iran's lashing out across the region and holding hostage the Strait of Hormuz are a threat to British interests and British allies. UK officials have not given details of the strike that targeted the Diego Garcia base Friday, which was unsuccessful. Iran in the past has asserted it has limited its missile range to sound 1,200 miles, but military experts said Iran may have used its space launch vehicle for an improvised firing. If you've got a space program, you've got a ballistic missile program, said Steve Prest, a retired Royal Navy Commodore. Britain hasn't participated in the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran, but has allowed U.S. bombers to use U.K. bases to attack Iran's missile sites. Lifting some sanctions. As Iran targets energy facilities in the region while threatening shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, the United Arab Emirates joined 21 other countries, including the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Japan, in saying they, quote, express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage. The Trump administration announced it's lifting sanctions on Iranian oil that was already loaded on ships as of Friday and will end the pause on April 19th. The license has limits, including a restriction on sales involving anyone in North Korea or Cuba. The decision does not increase the flow of oil production, a central factor in surging prices. Iran has evaded U.S. sanctions for years, suggesting that much of what it exports already reaches buyers. The head of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, asserted Iran's ability to attack vessels on the strait has been degraded. He said earlier in the week that multiple 5,000-pound bombs were dropped on an underground facility along Iran's coastline that was used to store anti-ship cruise missiles, mobile missile launchers, and other equipment. The U.S. is deploying 3 more amphibious assault ships and roughly 2,500 additional Marines in the Middle East, an official told the Associated Press. 2 other U.S. officials confirmed ships were deploying without saying where they were headed. All 3 spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the military operations. Saudi Arabia said it downed 20 drones in a couple of hours Saturday in its eastern region, home to major oil installations. No injuries or damage were reported. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stressed Saturday that Iranian escalation against Gulf states endangers the safety and stability of the region. The state-run Saudi press agency reported el-Sisi reiterated his country's rejection of the Iranian attacks on the Gulf states, adding the Egyptian president expressed solidarity with the kingdom against threats. Also Saturday, Arab League chief Ahmed Abul-Gheit welcomed the visits of el-Sisi and his Jordanian counterpart, King Abdullah II, to multiple Gulf states over the past few days, saying these visits reflect full Arab solidarity. More than 1,300 people have been killed in Iran during the war. In Israel, 15 people have been killed by Iranian missiles and 4 others have died in the occupied West Bank. At least 13 U.S. military members have been killed along with civilians in Gulf nations. But there is also a clash in Lebanon. Israel's military said its forces were conducting a, quote, targeted ground operation Saturday with the support of Israeli aircraft, and at least 4 militants were killed. Hezbollah said its fighters clashed with Israeli troops in the southern village of Qiyam. Israeli strikes targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon have killed more than 1,000 people and displaced more than 1 million, according to the Lebanese government. Hezbollah's civilian assets also have been targeted. Audit underway on payment to assigned counsels. Attorneys on board who take clients have stepped down. One of 2 major organizations responsible for assigning lawyers to represent low-income criminal defendants in Erie County has launched a forensic audit into money paid to its highest-paid lawyers. Kevin Stettlemeier, deputy defender of the Assigned Counsel program, also informed these lawyers that their payments will be suspended while the audit is conducted. They also will not be assigned new cases through the program. The pause is indefinite, its end to be determined at the conclusion of said audit, he said in an email. Lawyers who received the email are questioning whether any suspension of payments can be legally justified, and discussions are transpiring about whether any payment withholding will actually occur. Meanwhile, all the lawyers who serve on the county's Assigned Counsel Program board and also take clients through the program have stepped down. Those 11 people comprised a majority of the board until they collectively gave up those seats last weekend, said Brian Melbit, president of the Erie County Bar Association, which is responsible for appointing a majority of members. New members, who do not accept Assigned Counsel Program cases and would therefore have no conflict of interest, will begin being appointed next week, he said. It gives the opportunity to reconstitute the board, and we can pick people who are not panel attorneys, but who are some of the most respected, accomplished, and trusted attorneys in the community, Melber said. The leadership of the Assigned Counsel Program is in flux. The president of the board, Peter Vassilian, was among the lawyers who stepped down, and the position of chief defender has been vacant for the past few months. Melber said the bylaws for the Assigned Counsel Program will be changing to reflect recommendations from the Comptroller's Office and the state's Office of Indigent Legal Services. The adjustments are coming in response to a report released by the Erie County Comptroller's Office 2 weeks ago that raised questions about potential overbilling, improper payments, and lax administrative oversight during the review period of 2023 and 2024. According to the analysis, 8 of the highest-paid lawyers in the county's Assigned Counsel Program received more than $300,000 in compensation for 2024. One lawyer was paid $465,400, nearly twice as much as the Erie County District Attorney. I'm gratified, Comptroller Kevin Hardwick said about the developments. This is progress. Again, the purpose of these audits is not to play gotcha, although others may want to play that game with what we have uncovered, and I can see why that would be the case, because I think we've uncovered some significant findings, and there remain some very serious unanswered questions. So that's next. Big money, big questions. The Comptroller's Office shared additional confidential information beyond the public report with the Assigned Counsel Program regarding billing irregularities and recommended its leaders begin an immediate review of certain lawyers' payments and respond with how they intend to investigate. Stottlemyre said in a statement that as part of efforts to address county findings, the program will be cooperating with and facilitating an independent forensic audit to look deeper into the information shared by the Comptroller and to help identify any additional issues so that they can be fully addressed and rectified. The email that went to a small group of panel attorneys reflects that process and the program's commitment to responsible stewardship. The Assigned Counsel Program is supported with money from both Erie County and the state's Office of Indigent Legal Services. More than $20 million flowed out of that fund in 2024, an increase of more than 121% over a 2-year period, according to the report. The Comptroller's Office estimates $12.8 million came from Erie County. The state raised the rate for lawyers in the program in 2023 from $60 an hour for misdemeanor cases and $75 for felonies to $158 an hour across the board. Unlike the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo, which employs salaried public defenders who traditionally handle misdemeanor cases in city court and have expanded to cases in Cheektowaga, most low-income defendants charged with felony cases in Erie County have been represented by private practice lawyers who agree to accept cases as part of the Assigned Counsel Program. This year, as a result of ongoing concerns about the growing cost of the program, legal aid lawyers have begun handling more felony cases. But there's been pushback on holding pay. Lawyer James Maloney, who handles serious felony cases with the ACP and received $367,560 in 2024, said he believes more than half a dozen lawyers who exceeded $300,000 in payment in 2024 received an email from Stottlemyre regarding the forensic audit and suspension of new cases in pay until the audit is done. He also said that while he understands the goal of the program in doing an audit, he doesn't believe withholding payments for completed casework is legal. When people tell us that they're not going to pay us when I'm driving back at 2:30 in the morning on the icy roads from Collins for an arraignment that has nothing to do with the audit period, I would say it's something that probably should be addressed, he said, adding, "We're lawyers. We know our legal position. We're not going to flex our legal position because, quite frankly, we want the Assigned Counsel Program to survive and in a good shape, right? We think calmer heads will prevail." He also said he and other lawyers remain ethically bound to represent the assigned clients they already have, even if their invoices for payment remain on hold. In addition, he said, it's likely judges may still appoint him and other lawyers from the bench to represent defendants in cases where that lawyer is already representing the same defendant in another case. While Maloney handles violent felony cases, many of the lawyers on the list of highest earners handle primarily misdemeanor or family court cases. Maloney said lawyers in the Assigned Counsel Program panel are free to reject cases, which results in more cases being funneled to certain lawyers who often say yes. But it's hard work. Melber said he's glad attention has been brought to the Assigned Counsel Program and that if anyone knows of a lawyer who would be an asset to the Assigned Counsel Program board, they should reach out to him at the Bar Association. The criminal justice system is where we, front line, address challenges as a community, things like poverty, substance abuse, things like mental health, he said. The criminal justice system is where we first engage those issues, and having effective defense is a critical part of that. So we really all have an interest in this system working well so people are paying attention. He also gave a nod to the many lawyers representing poor defendants. There are hundreds of attorneys at the Legal Aid Bureau and something like 250 attorneys at the Assigned Counsel panel, he said. The Bar Association really appreciates and supports the work that they're doing on behalf of indigent clients. That work is incredibly important. It's hard work. They do it well, and we support them. We also support accountability when it comes to the use of public funds, and both of those things are in the interest of both those programs. They're in the interest of our community, and they're in the interest of the criminal justice system we serve. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:14 a.m. For our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:14 p.m. And now on to a front page feature. Another March Madness in Buffalo is in the books. This is what it looked like. Josh Ketry, Chief Operations Officer at Pearl Street Grill, is not normally the restaurant's doorman, but Thursday was far beyond a normal day. It was the first and longest day of March Madness. After nearly 30 years near KeyBank Center, Pearl Street Grill generally knows what to expect. Ketry recognizes the ebbs and flows of the Sabre season. He senses the rhythms of the concert crowd. The NCAA tournament's opening round games hit Buffalo last week for the 7th time since 2000, so the region and the people who put the hospitality in the hospitality industry had plenty of experience dealing with the crowds, the parking issues, the weather and rhythms of 4 games on Thursday and 2 on Saturday. This March Madness was different. There was a twist. The window of opportunity to feed fans between game blocks on Thursday was about a half hour shorter than usual. That was the money-making window for restaurants near the area. For Pearl Street Grill, already a 12-minute walk from the arena, that half hour mattered. We did this big NCAA preparation for Western New York. We had a meeting of all the restaurants that met at Resurgence Brewery, and we all prepped for this hour-and-a-half break, Ketry said. It changed last minute. Now we're all confused as to what to do. Is there going to be a rush? Ketry, wearing a wool blazer and black ball cap, leaned against the wall in the restaurant's entrance vestibule. He opened the inner door for guests like a sort of pre-host. Outside, the wind whipped all warmth from the air, though it also carried the scent of Cheerios. Nice touch for the tourists, courtesy of General Mills. By 5:30 p.m., the Michigan State versus North Dakota State game was running late. It hadn't yet reached halftime, and the next game was scheduled for 7:05. Ketry opened the door several times a minute for continuous customers. Lines formed out the door. Still, this isn't busy for us, Ketry said. He bet on busy evenings, opening all 4 floors and 2 all-you-can-eat buffets. He was prepared to feed 2,000 people. But by 5:30, he'd fed only around 300. Then a young couple from Rochester walked in. They said the Michigan State game had hit halftime. They're up by 20, so we decided to get here a little bit early, Tyler Brzezinski said. Another group had ditched the game early as well. The game's kind of a laughter right now, said customer Nick Ponchera. Traffic picked up from fans who didn't need to see an ending they could predict. They asked if their buffet had wings. Yes, but the wing buffet didn't have TVs because it's in a banquet space, normally used for weddings. And if you took a wedding room and add a lot of TVs to it, a lot of brides don't like that, Ketry said. He guided them towards the basement pizza buffet, which had many TVs. But Ketry remained unconvinced of a rush. This is a Sabres game, Ketry said, like 2 years ago. Then his optimism grew. The manager told him the first floor was full, the second floor was nearly full, the basement buffet couldn't handle much more, and the third floor buffet had room. We're heading the right way, Ketry said. If we get a push right here, we'll be good. But that was the peak. He poked his head out the door. I mean, there's a few people out there, he said. The wait for a table shrunk to 10 minutes. Not great, Ketry said. He wishes he didn't add the additional buffet. Golden sunlight cast long shadows from patrons as they crossed the street to head back to the arena. As they left, the gusts blew their perfumes and lingering cigarette smoke around the vestibule. A friend texted Ketry that a lot of people were eating at food trucks, but Ketry didn't mind. Competition makes everyone do better, he said. At Canal Side, where the food trucks had parked, the sky blazed pale yellow and bright blue as the sun set. It sounded like seagulls in skyway traffic. A few men dribbled a basketball on the boardwalk. Jonathan Rowan, co-owner of Cheesy Chick Food Truck, watched the sunset over the water from the truck's window. He may have benefited from the shorter window between games, but he had his woes too, especially with the cold weather. It's just an average day, Rowan said. But where else are you going to go on a Thursday night when it's already 30 degrees out to make money? Any day when you're making money is a good day. Thursday's crowd was tame, remarked Jesse Carson, a young Blasdell man with a mop of curly brown hair and 1 diamond stud earring. But it was not to dunk on the politeness of March Madness fans, only noon. Carson mans the Scott Street parking lot near the arena. He left a job in insurance to join the legion of people who work around the KeyBank Center. As his exposed fingers clutched a touchscreen card reader in biting 36-degree weather, he enjoyed himself. Sometimes people give me weed, Carson said, or they'll give me a bottle of alcohol or a beer. Sometimes he gets worse gifts, like when a customer threw up at his feet after an event. He personally bought an Uber for a man who was too drunk to get home recently. That wasn't the scene on Thursday afternoon. Thursday was wholesome. Fans marched down the sidewalks and into the arena, stopping to shoot baskets at Visit Buffalo's pop-up hoops. Cohen Mulligan from Ottawa took a few shots like someone who knew what he was doing. His elbow was at a right angle, his wrist flapped down in a follow-through. He didn't score too well as Tonawanda's Olivia Peterson, age 8, whose winning shots won her family a gift certificate to the Botanical Gardens. Elsewhere downtown, sparrows chirped from barren trees. Inside the Hyatt Regency, families repping different teams loafed on lobby couches. A few of the tallest men alive passed by. Nearly all of the hotel's 396 rooms were booked, said front desk supervisor Michael Mart, between two basketball teams, cheerleaders, marching bands, the whole 9 yards. Tiny overwinter coffee pulled out its patio furniture in barely above freezing temperatures. The cafe was full. Bob Valvano ordered a coffee. He's a broadcaster for the University of Louisville, whose basketball team, the Cardinals, kicked off the tournament. For college basketball fans of a certain age, he might be better known as the brother of the late Jim Valvano, Jimmy V, whose North Carolina State Wolfpack authored one of the greatest upsets in the sport's history by winning the 1983 tournament. Buffalo looks like it's big enough. There's stuff to do, and that's what people care about. Are there places to go and have a good meal, and are the people excited to have you there, Valvano said. I've been to some bigger cities. It's not like that big a deal. If Valvano's team lost, he returned home. If his team won, how far is Niagara Falls? They did win. Tim McMahon grilled hot dogs under a red and yellow umbrella outside KeyBank Center. He's been a downtown hot dog cart guy for nearly 30 years, but his empire is dwindling. A lot of the locations dried up, only because people aren't in the buildings, McMahon said. There's a lot of vacancies you see around here, so that's had a dramatic effect on the business, but we're still banging away. A group of locals loitered before the game in Tim Hortons. They used to visit downtown sometimes, but not so much these days. We got old, Joe Syracuse said. But now that the Sabres are doing good, Jim Verena said. Outside Tim Hortons, a couple of maritime charter school students passed out by one getting admission tickets to the neighboring Naval Park. Student Lindsay Asintz Browning Radford beamed as she said she liked seeing all the faces. Her classmates said the key to getting fans to take the vouchers was to smile. Some people may not want it, Browning Radford said. Her classmate Yana added, but we don't let that get to us. And now on to world news. Japan uneasy after Trump's Pearl Harbor comments. Senior U.S. and Japanese officials tend to shy away from anything but very careful public comments about Japan's 1941 sneak attack on U.S. forces at Pearl Harbor. So there was embarrassment, confusion, and unease on Saturday after President Trump casually used the World War II attack to justify his secrecy before launching the war in Iran. The Japanese discomfort was compounded by the fact that Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takachi was sitting awkwardly at Trump's side as he spoke. Partly the reaction is linked to the crucial security and economic role the U.S. plays for Japan, its top ally in the region. Put simply, Japan needs to make sure the U.S. relationship thrives. That's why Takaichi was in Washington. But it's also a reflection of just how fresh the political debate about Japan's role in World War II remains here, 80 years after its end. Senior leaders, including Takaichi, have argued Japan has apologized enough for what happened in the war. Takaichi herself has recently hinted at visiting Tokyo's controversial Yasukuni Shrine, where Japanese war criminals are honored among the 2.5 million war dead. It is, however, somewhat startling for Japan to see these history questions spill over into the White House summit. On Thursday, when asked by Japanese reporters why he didn't tell allies in Europe or Asia ahead of the U.S. attack on Iran, Trump cited Pearl Harbor to defend his decision, saying, quote, "Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor, okay?" The liberal-leaning Asahi newspaper said in an editorial Saturday, Trump's comments should, quote, "not be overlooked." Making such a remark to justify a sneak attack and boast about its outcome is a piece of nonsense that ignores lessons from history, Asahi said. But social media's reaction has been claims of rudeness, ranging from accusations of ignorance and rudeness by the U.S. president to claims he didn't see Japan as an equal partner. There were calls for Japan to protest what Trump said. Suneo Watanabe, a senior fellow at the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, said in an online opinion piece published in the Nikkei newspaper Saturday, Trump's comments were not bound by existing American common sense. I get the impression that the comment was intended to bring the Japanese reporter who asked the question or Ms. Takaichi into complicity in order to justify a sneak attack on Iran during diplomatic negotiations and without telling allied countries, Watanabe said. There's also a feeling that an unspoken understanding exists between U.S. and Japanese leaders to tread carefully on the subject. Both sides need each other, with Washington relying on Japan to host 50,000 troops and an array of powerful high-tech weapons, and Japan relying on the U.S. nuclear umbrella to deter hostile nuclear-armed neighbors. Japan's post-World War II constitution bans the use of force, except for its self-defense, but Takaichi and other officials are now seeking to expand the military's role. When it comes to U.S.-Japanese reconciliation, many here look to the example of former leaders Barack Obama and Shinzo Abe, who in 2016 paid tribute together at the Arizona Memorial at Pearl Harbor and at the Hiroshima Peace Park. In Russia, blocked protests over app add to the discontent. In one Russian city, officials blocked a rally due to a, quote, tree inspection. Elsewhere, they blamed snow removal problems or still existing COVID-19 restrictions. And in one location, administrators argued the reason for the protest didn't exist. Authorities in nearly a dozen Russian regions in recent weeks cited various excuses to prevent demonstrations against internet censorship and the blocking of the popular messaging app Telegram. In most cases, they succeeded. Mindful of a crackdown on dissent since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, activists decided not to risk holding unauthorized rallies, even if they weren't about the war. Some went to court to challenge government refusals to authorize pickets, while others scaled them back to smaller indoor gatherings. But the disapproval persists across the political spectrum over moves against Russia's second most popular messaging app, adding to frustrations over a growing list of various issues plaguing the country. Clearly, the situation has changed. The laws have become stricter, but the protest hasn't gone anywhere, said Alexander Sustov, a legislator in Russia's far eastern Primorye region, where a pro-Telegram rally was blocked last month. Discontent remains, and any ban only fuels the discontent, he added. Online control. Restricting Telegram in Russia is Russia's latest move to put the internet under government control. Thousands of websites and platforms are blocked, as are multiple virtual private networks allowing users to circumvent censorship, and widespread cell phone internet shutdowns leave only a handful of government-approved websites available. Telegram trails only WhatsApp, also severely restricted in popularity among Russians, and is widely used by government agencies for their official social media presence, as well as by pro-Kremlin commentators and military bloggers with hundreds of thousands of followers. Authorities encourage users to switch to Max, a government-backed messaging app that critics say is a state surveillance tool. Military bloggers criticize the moves against Telegram, arguing it's an indispensable communications tool for Russian troops in Ukraine and for activists running crowdfunding campaigns to help Moscow forces. The government's initially promised to not restrict Telegram on the battlefield, but a different signal later came from the Kremlin. At a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin for International Women's Day, a servicewoman called Telegram, quote, an adversarial communications tool, and agreed with him when he said that, quote, the use of communication systems that are not ours, not under our control, poses a danger to personnel in battle. Unconfirmed media reports predict the coming weeks will see a complete blocking of the app, which in December of 2025 had 93.6 million monthly users in Russia, or 76% of the population, according to the monitoring group Mediascope. Stifled from Moscow to Siberia. Blocking Telegram prompted various political forces, including those who support the war or the Kremlin in general, to act. Widespread dismay and the lack of a black and white narrative to justify the restrictions made people feel like they can afford to protest here, said political analyst Abbas Galanyov. Last month, members of Other Russia, an ultranationalist pro-war group, blocked the entrance to the Moscow office of state media and internet regulator Roskomnadzor with a bicycle cable and displayed a banner saying, "Give us an internet without supervision and Russia without Roscom disgrace." The Moscow activists face criminal charges. Regional branches of the Communist Party, which generally supports the Kremlin, tried to organize rallies in several places. In Siberia's Altai region, they were turned down after local officials said claims of an internet clampdown were at odds with reality. In southern Krasnodar, a rally for later in March has been authorized on the outskirts of the city. In the northern cities of Nuryan Mar and Sikitarvar, Communist Party activists managed to hold pickets with placards saying, "It's not up to officials to decide what we read." But those were exceptions, with authorities elsewhere refusing to allow rallies or blocking them at the last minute. Organizers in the Ural Mountains city of Perm secured a permit for a March 15th demonstration, but 2 hours before its start, activists were told of a potential emergency situation at the rally site that made it unsuitable for gathering. Some still showed up, though. Victor Gillen, age 80, unfurled a banner that read, "Vladimir Putin, I demand that you bring back freedom of thought, speech, and the internet." He was swiftly detained and fined. In the Siberian city of Novosibirsk, 16 people were detained this month at the site of a planned pro-Telegram rally. Although authorization for the protest at the square wasn't needed, participants arrived to find the site marked off with tape for a purported tree inspection, said activist Roman Malzikomov. Malzikomov and other activist journalists and some passers-by were detained but let go after a few hours. This past week, activists in several regions filed for authorization of more rallies on March 29th, but some were more swiftly rejected. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:31 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:31 p.m. Amid airport delays, talks on DHS shutdown pick up. After weeks of a stalemate and mounting airport delays nationwide, leaders in both parties are scrambling to work out a deal to reopen the Department of Homeland Security, though it remains unclear if a compromise is in reach. A Friday night meeting on Capitol Hill, the second straight day of talks, is the latest sign that Republicans in the White House are seeking a swift way out of the growing political crisis. Democrats remain tight-lipped as they emerge from the talks, and a key GOP leader said she expected the group to meet again in the coming days. Multiple Republicans said leaving the meeting that the GOP had bolstered its latest offer to Democrats, though they declined to specify how the White House was proposing to address Democrats' demands for new limits on immigration enforcement. Frustrations have been steadily growing on both sides of the aisle as to how to defuse a weeks-long standoff over the shutdown, as Democrats have so far dismissed GOP efforts to negotiate over ICE tactics as inadequate. But lawmakers are eager to reach a deal in the next week before Congress leaves town for a lengthy spring recess, faced with hourly reports of long lines at airports and shocking FEMA money. A meeting with White House Board Czar Tom Homan and bipartisan Senate appropriators Friday evening was brief, with Democrats leaving without speaking to reporters less than an hour after it began. Republicans at the meeting said that Democrats were not upset when they left, said Homan, and he added, discussions are continuing. We need to get the government back open. A Democratic source familiar with the talks said it was a productive meeting, but there's a way to go to secure the significant reforms Democrats have laid out for weeks and that are necessary to earn the support of the Democratic caucus. Senate Appropriations Chair Susan Collins of Maine told reporters the White House has added to its offer, describing the latest version as a very fair, reasonable offer. Without outlining specifics, Collins added, yes, they are now waiting for Democrats to counter. When asked if the group was to meet again on Saturday, Collins replied, I certainly hope so, but noted that depends on Democrats, she added. I thought the meeting could have gone longer. President Trump on Saturday threatened to deploy federal immigration agents to airports if congressional Democrats do not immediately agree to fund airport safety. I will move our brilliant and patriotic ICE agents to the airports, where they will do security like no one has ever seen before, Trump wrote in a social media post. So far, Democrats have remained defiant in their position that they will not fund DHS without concrete changes to federal law, preventing the kind of violence seen in Minneapolis earlier this year. They argue the White House is refusing to make any real concessions. Senator Jackie Rosen, a centrist Democrat from Nevada, was adamant earlier on Friday that she will not alter her position until the White House gets serious in its proposals, a sign Democratic Party leaders are not shrinking away from demands. You've seen the offers they sent back. We'll be glad to uphold the current law. Well, that's great. That's no negotiation. We'll be glad to follow the Fourth Amendment where we think we should. Oh, you suddenly realize we have a Bill of Rights? Thank you for saying that you'll enforce it through the executive branch. That's not a negotiation, she told CNN ahead of the Friday night meeting. Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock, a Democrat who represents the massive Atlanta airport that's experienced some of the worst delays in the shutdown, also made clear he wasn't backing down from his party's demands on ICE. I don't know why the Republicans insist on holding federal workers hostage, holding TSA workers hostage, so they can have an unaccountable paramilitary force on our streets. It's unconscionable, Warnock said. When asked if he would support a short-term funding bill amid ongoing ICE negotiations, Warnock said he would not vote to, quote, continue the status quo. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, told CNN ahead of Friday's meeting that the major sticking point is the GOP is still unwilling to budge. Republicans aren't producing any real meaningful offers. We've given them reasonable priorities, and we have not seen anything meaningful from them yet, Murphy said. He added other Democrats have pushed an alternate funding proposal that would restore federal dollars for TSA, FEMA, and other agencies, just not immigration enforcement. Republicans, however, have rejected the idea. Multiple GOP senators told CNN they would only support a bill that fully funds DHS, not simply funding agencies in a piecemeal fashion. No, I am not defunding the police. I'm not defunding ICE, Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, told CNN when asked if he would support a bill to fund TSA but not the full department. I'm not going to do that. Democrats argue immigration agencies support ICE, specifically ICE and Customs and Border Patrol don't need the cash right now. Republicans already gave them enough money to last years through the massive domestic policy bill last year, they say. ICE got $75 billion in one big ugly bill. They're not suffering from any lack of funding, Senator Warnock said. We ought to fund TSA now. Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, said he would only support that Democratic proposal if the very next day Republicans all agreed to use their special budgetary powers to override Democrats and muscle through their own ICE funding bill. I think we ought to do it. And then the very next day after we do it, we ought to do a reconciliation bill that does everything we want to do with respect to ICE, Kennedy said. Meanwhile, a judge sides with New York Times in suit over Pentagon access limits. A federal judge agreed Friday to block the Trump administration from enforcing a policy limiting news reporters' access to the Pentagon, agreeing with the New York Times that key portions of the new rules are unlawful. U.S. District Judge Paul Friedman in Washington, D.C. sided with the newspaper and ruled that the Pentagon policy illegally restricts the press credentials of reporters who walked out of the building rather than agree to the new rules. The Times sued the Pentagon and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth in December, claiming the credentialing policy violates the journalist's constitutional rights to free speech and due process. The current Pentagon press corps is comprised mostly of conservative outlets that agreed to the policy. Reporters from outlets that refused to consent to the new rules, including the Associated Press, have continued reporting on the military. The Defense Department has been letting some legacy media reporters who didn't agree to the restrictions back into the Pentagon for some of Hegseth's Iran war briefings, but Hegseth rarely calls on them. Friedman, who was nominated to the bench by Democratic President Bill Clinton, said the policy fails to provide fair notice of what routine, lawful journalistic practices will result in the denial, suspension, or revocation of Pentagon press credentials. He ruled it violates the First and Fifth Amendment rights to free speech and due process. Those who drafted the First Amendment believed the nation's security requires a free press and an informed people, and that such security is endangered by governmental suppression of political speech. That principle has preserved the nation's security for almost 250 years. It must not be abandoned now, the judge wrote. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell posted late Friday on X, "We disagree with the decision and are pursuing an immediate appeal." But the ruling has been lauded. New York Times spokesperson Charlie Stadtlatter said the newspaper believes the ruling enforces the constitutionally protected right for the free press in this country. Americans deserve visibility into how their government is being run and the actions that the military is taking in their name and with their tax dollars, Stadtlatter said in a statement. Today's ruling reaffirms the right of the Times and other independent media outlets to continue to ask questions on the public's behalf. Theodore Boutros, an attorney who represented the Times at a hearing this month, said in a statement that the court ruling is a powerful rejection of the Pentagon's effort to impede freedom of the press and the reporting of vital information to the American people during a time of war. The judge ordered the Pentagon to reinstate the press credentials of 7 Times journalists. He also said his decision to vacate the challenged policy terms applies to all regulated parties, noting that part of the rule, the Pentagon Press Association, which includes AP reporters, called for the immediate reinstatement of the press credentials of all of its members. The PPA released a statement saying, quote, "This is a great day for freedom of the press in the United States. It's also hopefully a learning opportunity for Pentagon leadership, which took extreme steps to limit press access to information in wartime. The Defense Department has argued that the policy imposes common sense rules that protect the military from the disclosure of national security information. The goal of that process is to prevent those who pose a security risk from having broad access to American military headquarters," government attorneys wrote. Times attorneys claim the policy is designed to silence unfavorable press coverage of President Trump's administration. The First Amendment flatly prohibits the government from granting itself the unbridled power to restrict speech because the mere existence of such arbitrary authority can lead to self-censorship, they wrote. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:40 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:40 p.m. And now on to business news. Well, the business of higher education. Empire AI readies for big strides on UB's North Campus. The University of Buffalo plans to break ground this fall on an Empire AI supercomputing center on its North Campus in Amherst. Once it's up and running, the facility will be a focal point of the state's Empire AI initiative. Empire AI is a research consortium of higher education and private research institutions from around the state. UB is the home of its hub, and others are noticing, as Venu Govindaru discovered on a recent recruiting trip to India on behalf of the university. I'm telling you, Empire AI is the biggest draw, because that's how they take the news, said Govindaruj, UB Senior Vice President for Research, Innovation, and Economic Development. AI is happening. Empire AI is in New York, and Buffalo is the home. Competition among U.S. universities for international students has become more intense amid the current political climate and U.S. issuing fewer student visas. As UB tries to attract more international students, UB's connection to Empire AI helps the university stand out, Govindaruj says. Similarly, faculty members are being drawn to UB's new Department of AI and Society, he said. "I think it's making a huge difference," Govindaruj said. Empire AI's, quote, alpha system launched in 2024 at UB's downtown campus. UB is preparing to install equipment for Empire AI's beta system, which will have computing power 11 times more powerful than alphas. The way to look at it is, if you're a scientist and your job was going to take 2 days before, now it'll likely take a couple of hours, Govindaruj said. Your job was going to take a month, now it's a few days. So it's just completely accelerating the whole process and keeps the momentum going onto research projects, he said. UB says researchers are using the turbocharged computing power to develop technology for projects, including those designed to ease the nation's shortage of mental health professionals, improve medical imaging, and help people with motor neuron diseases such as ALS. Since Empire AI is a consortium, UB shares access to the systems with other partners who are carrying out projects of their own. Empire AI has grown into a $500 million initiative, a combination of public and private funding. What the governor has allowed us to do with Empire AI is unleashing these whole possibilities for curiosity-driven research for the public good, Govindaruj said. This is not very easy to emulate, but by the way, because you need the political will, and you need the funding, and you need the critical mass of universities, and so on. We're very fortunate. But next comes the Gamma system, the permanent center plan for North Campus. The Empire AI equipment from the downtown facility will be moved there. The next supercomputing center is expected to be operational by 2028, Kiran Keshav, Director of Research Computing at Empire AI, said. "We are right now at the latest and greatest when we released beta," Keshav said. "So we're leaving it open to see what's going to come with the Gamma data center build-out and what technologies we'll have to work with that are at the time. It relates to the computing and storage platform." Keshav said Empire AI is making available to researchers the type of resources used to be accessible by only a few large tech companies. Because universities on their own couldn't afford them, those limitations had the potential to leave academic researchers waiting in line or having to scale back their ideas in areas such as health, climate, or infrastructure, he said. As powerful as the beta system will be compared to the alpha, the gamma system will represent another huge leap in supercomputing power, Govindaruj said. It's only left to our imagination what the next wave of technology will be like, he added. And he sees potential for spin-off development from research by companies that want to have locations near the facility. I think it'll be a cascading effect in an indirect way, that you want to be close to where the action is, Govindarajan said. And again, the cascading effect is more faculty members are coming here for Empire AI, more students are coming here, talented ones. With this kind of training, how many students are graduating from other universities who will have hands-on training with these kinds of machines, he said. And now on to personal finance. Stay calm in a storm. When stock markets swing, it can pay for investors to be patient. With the war in Iran slowing the global flow of oil and causing extreme swings in stock markets, it's natural to want to do something to protect your retirement savings. Historically, though, staying calm is usually your best bet. The U.S. stock market has a track record of recovering from every steep dive it took, whether it's a global financial crisis, a trade war, or a military war. The S&P 500 so far always recouped its losses to push towards more records. Of course, that can take years, but anyone who moved their 401k investment out of stocks risked missing out on the recovery and further gains. Will that happen again? No one can say for sure, and some things are different this time around. But many professional investors and strategists are sticking with the advice they usually give. As long as it's money you don't need soon, which should never be in stocks in the first place, try to be patient and ride out the stock market swings, tough as it is. Huge swings with little change. The S&P 500 was only 4.4% below its all-time high, which was set in January as of March 12th's close. It feels worse because of how sharply stock prices have swung recently, often hour to hour as well as day to day. Several times since the start of the Iran war, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged about 900 points in the morning, only to erase its loss later in the day or come close to it. The U.S. stock market doesn't often behave exactly like this, but it has a regular history of falling to steep losses before rising again. The S&P 500 saw a decline of at least 10% every year or so. Such drops are common enough that professional investors have a name for them: a correction. Often experts view them as a culling of optimism that could otherwise run overboard and drive stock prices a little too high. So should you sell now? Selling your stocks or moving your 401k investments away from stocks and into bonds may offer less chance of seeing huge drops. However, getting out of the market also would mean having to figure out the right time to get back in, unless you're willing to give up any future recovery and gains. Timing the market correctly is always difficult. Some of the best days in the U.S. stock market's history were clustered in among downturns. Some recoveries take longer than others, but experts often recommend not putting money into stocks that you can't afford to lose for several or up to 10 years. Emergency funds for things like home repairs or medical bills shouldn't be invested in stocks. But if you're new to investing, apps on smartphones can make trading easier and cheaper than ever. That's helped draw in a new generation of investors who may not be used to such wild swings in the market. That's good news for younger investors who often have the gift of time. With decades to go until retirement, they can afford to ride the waves and let their stock portfolios hopefully recover before compounding and eventually growing even bigger. For them, drops in prices may almost be like stocks going on sale. If you're near retirement, older investors have less time than younger ones for the investments to bounce back. People who already retired may want to cut back on spending and withdrawals after sharp market downturns because bigger withdrawals will remove more potential compounding ability in the future. Even in retirement, some people will need their investments to last 30 years or more. So should you raid the 401k? If you have no other choice, you have no other choice. But selling stocks in your 401k account and withdrawing cash packs a double whammy. One, you may have to pay tax as well as a possible 10% early withdrawal penalty. 2, a withdrawal means no chance of those investments recovering their losses and growing over time. A 401k loan is possible in some cases, but those come with their own peculiarities and possible penalties. But if you have a pension, you don't have to pay as much attention to any of this. Defined benefit pensions, which few U.S. workers still have, mean you're in line to get a defined payment regardless of what the stock market does. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present today's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. Sister Donna Anthony, OSF, Sister Anthony Marie. Ronald J. Archambault. Elizabeth Baldoff, nee Schewitz. Jean C. Bartlow, nee Pritchard. Mark E. Blankenberg. Jean Sharon Boxstedt Dorico. Ronald J. Bosella. Richard Kudek. Diane M. Davison, nee Tomasic. Elizabeth DeSillo. Sean T. Doyle Sr. Walter J. Dryden Jr. Joan M. Dulac Heidinger. Daniel J. Elmer Sr. Edward G. Fozer. Margaret Marge Foster, nee Scora. Jen A. Fuhrer. Barbara A. Hoffman, nee Bojanowski. Samuel V. Butch Hromchak. Kent H. Igolden. Paula C. Janico Toronto. William M. Johnson. Kathy Catalin Kaleman. Elsie J. Kelly, nee Baedeker. Samir Kopti. Alice H. Cott. James J. Kolich. Michael Krupp. Roger William LeGoff. Lawrence Levine. Geraldine Jerry C. Lewis. Alice R. Mamasor, nee Gregory. Rita McDermott Curry, RSM, Senior, formerly Senior Mary Immaculate, RSM. Daniel J. McMahon. Michael F. McManus. Vita Misselskos, nee Cricinati. Judith M. Nolan, nee Knopf. Nancy A. Paneer. Marie N. Pantera, nee Stifle. Gloria P. Poffel, nee McNatty. Joanne P. Quinn, nee Rosalowski. Robert Rivera. John L. Roberts. Carolyn Robinson, nee Jackson. Barbara Rock. Brenda Ross Turner. Alexandra A. Sarich, nee Lucky. Eugene H. Schonhaufer. Joanne M. Shimmy, nee DeRose. Sandra Sobinsky. Joyce Stawachiak, nee Shinsus. Deborah Staniszewski. Joseph Michael Zavronsky. Keith W. Trode. Elizabeth V. Turner, nee White. Philip Valenti. Jeffrey Carl J.J. Vance. Nancy A. Varco, nee Gullo. Ronald D. Walters. Evelyn Williamson. Earl W. Willie Wolf Jr. Marianne Zimmerman, nee Kleidenfelder. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. Again, that number is 716-821-5555. Now on to the horoscopes. It's Royal Stars from Georgia Nichols. Happy birthday for Sunday, March 22nd, 2026. You're energetic, blunt, honest, and honorable. You're also brave and persistent. This year you will attain power, leadership, and recognition for your past work. It'll be a busy year. The stars show the kind of day you'll have, with 5 being dynamic, 4 is positive, 3 is average, 2 is so-so, and 1 is just difficult. For Aries, you're having a 4-star day. Today's a mixed bag because in one way your energy is dreamy and laid back. Nevertheless, when it comes to financial matters or shopping, you'll have definite ideas. Tonight, check your money. For Taurus, you're having a 5-star day. It's a winning day. Today the moon is in your sign, dancing beautifully with lucky Jupiter and fiery Mars, which gives you energy and good fortune. Tonight, rebellion. For Gemini, it's a 4-star day. Today's your idealism is aroused, and this might affect your thoughts of your future goals. Tonight, privacy. For Cancer, a 5-star day. Today, your spidey sense is strong around bosses, parents, and people in authority. You'll know what they want and don't want. Tonight, something unexpected. For Leo, a 4-star day. People notice you today, perhaps because you're using any influence you have to help people, especially people who are different in another country. Tonight, freedom. For Virgo, it's a 5-star day. Because you have a genuine concern for others today, you might be tempted to give away the farm. Don't do this. Tonight, check your travel plans. For Libra, it's a 4-star day. Relationships are important to you, and today the sun is opposite your sign, lined up with Neptune, which can make things fuzzy. Tonight, check banking. For Scorpio, a 5-star day. Be cooperative with others because someone might need your help regarding sporting events, children's activities, the arts, the entertainment world, or even travel plans. Tonight, a curveball. For Sagittarius, you are high energy today, which is why you're likely to get a lot done. Work-related travel is likely. Tonight, check your pet. For Capricorn, a 4-star day. Make time to socialize with others today. Enjoy sporting events, fun activities with kids, happy hour with friends, or some schmoozing with someone. Tonight, be vigilant. For Aquarius, a 4-star day. Although you have energy to make things happen at home today, nevertheless, your thinking might be fuzzy or unrealistic. Tonight, domestic changes. And for Pisces, a 5-star day. You're charged with energy today, which is why all your communications with others will be focused and productive. Tonight, pay attention. And for today in history, on this date, March 22nd, in 1765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act to raise money from the American colonies, which fiercely resisted the tax. The Stamp Act was repealed a year later. In 1894, ice hockey's first Stanley Cup championship was played, in which the Montreal Hockey Club defeated the Ottawa Hockey Club 3-1. In 1963, the Beatles' debut album, Please Please Me, was released in the United Kingdom on the Parlophone record label. In 1972, in the Eisenstadt v. Baird decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled unmarried people had the same right to possess and use contraception as married people did. In 1978, Carl Wallenda, the 73-year-old patriarch of the Flying Wallenda's High Wire Act, fell to his death while attempting to walk a cable strung between 2 hotel towers in San Juan, Puerto Rico. In 2019, former President Jimmy Carter became the longest-living chief executive in American history at 94 years old and 172 days. He exceeded the lifespan of the late former President George H.W. Bush. Carter would eventually pass away at age 100 in December of 2024. And in 2021, 10 people were killed in a mass shooting at a King Soopers supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. The shooter, Ahmad Alissa, was sentenced to life in prison without parole in September of 2024. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Sunday, March 22nd on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this first hour has been Edwin J. Vieira. Stay tuned for Ron Bickelman in the second hour. Thank you for listening.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
continue now with our reading of articles from the Buffalo News. Your reader is Ron Bickelman. Western New York interests pile up for slice of the state budget pie. Diane Shakur and fellow volunteers from AARP New York visited the state capitol on a dual mission Tuesday to call for an increase in state funding for aging services and a decrease in utility costs. Our income is not going up, said Shakur, 83 of Buffalo, in a hallway outside the Assembly chamber. We have a fixed income and we need help. With 2 weeks to go before the state's April 1st deadline to pass a budget, Shakur is echoing a familiar refrain. Both houses of the state legislature passed separate state spending plan last week, which followed a series of joint legislative hearings to gauge input on Governor Kathy Hochul's $263 billion budget proposal. Hochul and the state's two most powerful lawmakers, Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, Democrat from the Bronx, and State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Democrat from Yonkers, will negotiate the terms of the final budget before it goes to a vote in both houses. Shakur was one of several volunteers from Western New York who donned the red AARP shirts in urging state leaders to add $173.5 million for additional aging services. They said it is incredibly difficult for caregivers and their patients to know where to go for resources. AARP and Public Utility Law Project, or PULP, also sent a letter to Hochul, Heastie, and Stewart-Cousins requesting a must-do list of measures to make energy costs more affordable. We're here to be the voice of caretakers who are busy at home caregiving, and they can't come out and say what they need, said Amber Sastry of Amherst. They need the funding. They need the local support in our community. Earlier Tuesday, Gretchen Gonzalez, Executive Director of the Erie County Bar Association Volunteer Lawyers Project, joined lawmakers and advocates calling on the state to fully restore funding in the budget for interest on lawyers' account, IOLA fund. The fund has since 1984 required attorneys to pool for the interest on lawyer trust accounts to generate money for a fund that benefits civil legal services for the poor. The money pays for legal representation for a wide range of litigants facing issues such as eviction, domestic violence, foreclosure, tax issues, consumer protection, healthcare, and immigration. Both the Assembly and Senate budget plans restored IOLA's spending authority from Hochul's proposed $77.5 million to $102.5 million. In Buffalo, our immigrant neighbors are an essential part of our community, but too often they are forced to contend with a confusing immigration system under the Trump administration for a fear they will be deported without due process, Gonzalez said. Worse, too many of them do this alone without an advocate to fight for them. Outside the state Senate's chamber, United University Professions President Fred Cole, whose union represents 42,000 SUNY professionals, faculty, and staff, said the state needs to restore $41.2 million to 4 SUNY campuses, including $16 million to SUNY Buff State University and $11 million to SUNY Fredonia to make up structural deficits. What we're saying is let's take account of the campuses with the biggest deficits, Cole told the news. The Coalition for Children's Behavioral Health, a statewide advocacy organization, has asked for $200 million in the budget to increase Medicaid reimbursement rates to help them provide services. The coalition's president, Kaylee Zaloga, had recently visited the Capitol, joined by Elizabeth McPartland, president and CEO of the Child and Family Services of Buffalo. McPartland said about 300 youths were on waiting lists, including children in foster care in need of counseling for reuniting with their families, while others were in residential centers needing outpatient care, and others were victims of neglect and sexual abuse. The Assembly added $20 million for the services in its budget resolution, far short of what the coalition asked for. If lawmakers are serious about addressing the youth and mental health crisis and fulfilling the promise of settlement, the final state budget must include at least $200 million to strengthen the continuum of community-based mental health services for children, Zaloga said in a statement. Hochul, a Buffalo-born Democrat, has made affordability the theme of her campaign as she faces re-election in a race against Nassau Executive Bruce Blakeman. She reportedly said she will not publicly negotiate details of the budget. Continuing along in local news, man who molested and killed 7-year-old Wyoming County girl seeks parole release. The sheer cruelty and brutality of a crime rocked the people of Wethersfield, a quiet rural town in Wyoming County, with fewer than 900 people. One night in February 1997, Angel Cologne molested Samantha Zeldovzar, 7, in her mother's house trailer. According to a statement Cologne later gave to police, the 25-year-old man used a pillow to smother Samantha because she wouldn't stop crying. She loaded Samantha's body into his truck and buried her in a nearby cornfield. Next morning, Cologne falsely told his fiancée, the girl's mother, that he had put Samantha on her bus to school like any other ordinary day. For 3 months, rescuers searched for the girl's body while her family agonized and prayed she was still alive. Finally, a farmer plowing his field made a terrible discovery. The crime occurred about 44 miles southeast of Buffalo. Sentenced to 25 years to life in prison in 1998, Cologne now says he is sorry for what he did and asks to be released on parole. The state parole board will hear his case in May. Some people who knew the slain girl and her family are mounting a campaign to prevent Cologne from ever being released from prison. I wrote a letter asking the parole board to keep him in prison, and I know a lot of people who also sent letters. Elizabeth DeLude, a childhood friend of the murder victim, told the Buffalo News on Wednesday, Samantha was a vibrant, beautiful kid, so happy and full of life. I promised myself years ago I will always be an advocate for her. Cologne, now 52, is incarcerated at the maximum security Clinton's Correctional Facility, about 35 miles south of the Canadian border. He has already been twice turned down for parole in 2022 and 2024. During his 2024 parole hearing, he testified that he's ashamed of his crime. He said he has worked hard in prison to rehabilitate himself, stay out of trouble, and learn skills that will enable him to find employment if released. The killer told parole commissioners that he was lost, miserable, not myself, when he molested and murdered Samantha. It's something I can never take back, Cologne testified, according to the transcript of the 2024 hearing. There's no excuse, no excuse. I hate myself. It's as simple as that. Cologne referred to the crime as the worst possible thing possible. There's no excuse, and he said he's determined to live a good life if he ever gets out of prison. He also testified he was twice assaulted in 2023 by other prisoners who targeted him because of the crime for which he was convicted. He said he struggles to understand why he committed such a hateful crime. Your explanation was that you were too young, stupid, and not ready to have children. How does that translate into raping a young child and suffocating her? A parole office commissioner asked Cologne. It doesn't, Cologne answered. 3 parole commissioners who heard his case voted unanimously to turn down his 2024 request for parole, saying he would not be eligible to apply again until 2026. Your actions were callous and demonstrated a total disregard for the sanctity of life, the commissioners wrote, adding that they believe there is a reasonable probability that he would commit more crimes if he were released from prison. Commissioners wrote that they were also disturbed that Cologne lied after the murder to Samantha's family and to law enforcement, giving the family false hopes for 3 months that the girl might be alive. Hundreds of people, including police, volunteers, firefighters, and family friends, took part in an exhaustive search. I remember when she disappeared, I was hoping she had just wandered off somewhere, and she was in the woods still alive, DeLude recalled. One of Cologne's defense attorneys, Norman Effman, describes Cologne's case as one of the most memorable and disturbing he's ever handled in his 57 years as a lawyer. Cologne was so haunted by his own actions, he was barely able to discuss the crime in court or even on his own defense team, Effman recalled. Prosecutors originally were determined to pursue the death penalty in the case and only agreed to stop pursuing it after Cologne agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder, Elfman said. For the defense team, this was not a case of whodunit, Elfman said. It was a case of how do we keep our client from receiving the death penalty. Elfman has represented hundreds of people who committed violent crimes, including many who filed appeals after they were denied parole. He declined to comment when asked if he believes Cologne should ever be released on parole. Based on the many cases I've seen, I can tell you he faces a very difficult challenge, Elfman said. When evaluating a request for parole release, the state's commissioners look at a wide range of factors, including whether the individual shares true remorse, what kind of family support the individual has, a record of conduct in prison, and whether the person would pose a danger in the community. One thing they always look very closely at is instant defense, the actual crime they committed, Elfman said. Based on the facts of this case, it would not be unusual for his request to be denied strictly based on the instant offense. What Colon did to Samantha terrified the entire community, said DeLude, who still lives in Wyoming County, has 5 children of her own. What he did was so terrible, I don't think he should ever be released in the community again, she said. He doesn't deserve it. Cremated remains of 8 veterans in Forest Lawn to move because of Main Street project. The city expects to start digging soon to reconstruct the 2.5-mile stretch of Main Street. Concerned about potential effects of the road project, officials at Forest Lawn already have. The cemetery is in process of moving the cremated remains of 8 veterans buried on its eastern end near Main Street. The section of the cemetery from which the remains are being moved, known as the Field of Valor Annex, sits above the Scajaquada Creek infrastructure that runs under and near Main Street, according to Forest Lawn. Cemetery officials have been able to reach the family of only 6 of the deceased, so Monday, Forest Lawn asked the judge for a court order granting permission to move the remains of the other 2. Moving the remains is being done out of abundance of caution because the road project happens, a Forest Lawn spokesman said in a written statement to the Buffalo News Friday. Under New York law, moving them requires consent of all of the kin of each person buried or a court order granting permission, a spokesman said. Forest Lawn has successfully contacted the next of kin of 6 of the veterans and arranged for the reinterments with its family's consent in full military honors. However, after exhaustive efforts, the cemetery has been unable to contact next of kin for the 2 other veterans and is now seeking permission of the court for the reinterments. Working on the main streetscape project known as Middle Main Street could begin as early as this spring. Ionat Mayor Sean Ryan's director of communications said in an email. A contract for the work has been awarded, Ott said. City officials described the project as a complete streets transformations running from the Goodell Street downtown to Kensington Avenue near Sisters Hospital. Forest Lawn officials believe the work on the portion of Main Street near the cemetery may start as early as 2027, CEO Julie Snyder said in a court filing. The 2 sets of remains have already been removed, while new sites have been chosen for the 4 sets of remains, an attorney for Forest Lawn wrote in a court filing. The Field of Annex is relatively new and narrow subsection of the Field of Valor's Veterans section of the cemetery, according to Forest Lawn. The planned reconstruction of Main Street may affect the stability of Scajaquada Street infrastructure under and adjacent to Main Street. Attorney Hugh M. Russ III said in a court filing. Russ is also a member of the Forest Lawn Board of Directors. The case has been assigned to the state Supreme Court Justice Lynn Keene. The cemetery plans to re-enter the remains with full military honors on May 25th after the Erie County American Legion's annual Memorial Day ceremony. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 13 minutes after the hour. Gambling ban irks some at its senior center. Some pinochle players are not happy. Something missing from the weekly pinochle games at the Amherst Center for Senior Citizens. The seniors are no longer allowed to pay $4 to play cards for the day, with a chance to win back a modest sum when they're done. That's because town officials say this violates the new rule prohibiting gambling at Amherst Senior Center. The change has annoyed some card players. Just took the fun out of it, says Joanne Hall, 73, Tonawanda resident who has played pinochle for a decade there. Amherst officials say playing cards for money is a form of gambling. Team leaders said they would never apply for a state gambling license for the senior center and don't want to get into legal trouble for hosting these games without one. And some recent incidents also convinced administrators it was time to update the center's code of conduct, officials said. It's not any one situation that got us to this point. It's just an overall decision that was made out of respect for all our participants, all our staff, Melissa Abel, the town directors of Senior Citizens, said in an interview. Several pinochle players said card games with a modest voluntary buy-in have gone on for years with no problems and with full knowledge of the center staff. The players said this isn't gambling, and several expressed frustration the town made the rule change without seeking their input. we're not doing this to make money. It's not a gambling thing. It's just a way to put a little pizzazz in the game. And I think it was handled poorly, said David Ziegler, Buffalo resident and center member who played pinochle regularly. Low-stake card games. Pinochle Club, which meets twice a week at the center on John James Audubon Parkway near the town's police headquarters, has collected a fee for at least 14 years. Carmela Vela has played. It was $3 initially, now it's $4, he said. Players don't have to pay if they don't want to, or they can't afford to. But in the case, they're not eligible for the prize. Most prizes goes to the top finishers, with the rest spent on pizza, coffee, donuts, birthday cakes, and new decks of cards through the year, members said. Everybody knows where all the money goes. Nothing is spent other than on us, said Hall, a retired Erie County employee. Hall said most she's won in one day is $12. You might win enough to take your grandson to get a McDonald's hamburger, Ziegler said. But Vela said the money gives seniors something to play for. The reason you give a prize is you have control and you run a quality game, said Vela, 85, a GM retiree. Pinochle players said the money has never caused issues. We just have a group of people, and as long as I've been here, there's never been a problem, never been a conflict, Hall said. The Euchre Club also charges a nominal fee, Vela and Ziegler said, and there are poker gamers in the billiards room. Unlike Captain Renault in Casablanca, senior center staff weren't shocked to learn this was taking place. We just kind of ignored it for a number of years, Abel said. Amherst sees gambling. What prompted Amherst officials to place new restrictions on card games? A couple of pinochle players said they heard about an incident involving participants in a poker game. Abel declined to comment, but said her concerns weren't limited to one event. Over the years, yes, there have been different things that have happened that we have had to basically step in, Abel said. We had to enforce the code of conduct a few times for various reasons. Prompted a discussion about whether the town would be liable for allowing gambling at the senior center. Abel said she consulted with town attorney Stephen Bengert, and they drafted an update to the senior center's code of conduct. The senior center has a code of conduct for years but never addressed gambling. They were giving out winnings at the end of the game, all of which cannot be done under New York State law as far as gambling goes, Abel said. Other towns allow this, risking something of value on a contest that depends on an element of chance, even where the skill of the contestants is a factor, is considered gambling under state law, according to the State Gambling Commission. A person who aids such activity, including maintaining the premises at which it occurs, could be illegally liable for promoting gambling. Lee Park, a commission spokesperson, said in an email. How do seniors address this? How do other senior centers address this? West Seneca Senior Center has its own code of conduct that bars revealing attire, among other provisions, but doesn't mention gambling. West Seneca seniors run their own bingo games and play pinochle for low stakes, Supervisor Gary Dickinson said. We never had anything like disputes that come up over who gets the money or who really won the hand or anything like that. Some seniors play poker at the Clarence Senior Center with a small amount of money on the line without issue, Supervisor Patrick Casillo said. Casillo said directors of several area senior centers, including Clarence, have recently discussed whether they need formal permission from the state to allow the activity. We're hoping we don't for nickels and dimes, he said, and we thought since we were there, we might as well kick the tires and see what's involved if we wanted to start bingo. However, Town Supervisor Sean Lavin said Amherst wouldn't seek a gambling license and instead needed to update the center's code of conduct. The revised code went to the town board, which approved the change on February 2nd without discussion. First reported in the Amherst Bee. Abel soon sent an email informing center members of the new gambling prohibition. Frustrated card players. Some members of the club insist playing pinochle for such low stakes, and there were much of the fee is used for club expenses is not gambling. Were there any other options, Vela asked? Are we really going into the category of gambling? Several members said the town should have consulted with them before making the change. Town officials said there was nothing to negotiate. Ziegler and Vela spoke at the February 23rd town board hearing. A lot of people felt like they were being treated like children, Ziegler told the news. They felt left out. Players said participation in Monday and Wednesday pinochle sessions has fallen. The town isn't swayed. And Abel said several players told her they welcome change. We had more positive comments of people saying, well, now I'm going to come back and play because I don't feel comfortable gambling. I didn't have any money to do it. I just wanted to come and play cards. Lavin said Amherst Senior Center has plenty to offer without hosting gambling. He said if seniors want to play cards for money elsewhere, they're welcome to do so. We're not allowing it to occur at the senior center. We're not. The supervisor said it's a slippery slope, and once you start going down this path, when does it end? Continuing in local news, NFTA holds donation drive to support local TSA agents during partial government shutdown. Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority is organizing a community donation drive to support the Transportation Security Administration employees who may be struggling to pay for gas, food, and other necessities because of missed paychecks. The drive will benefit TSA agents in both Buffalo Niagara International Airport and Niagara Falls International Airport who have not been paid due to partial government shutdown that began February 14th. TSA agents missed the first full paycheck March 13th after receiving only a partial check at the end of February. The NFTA Community Drive is in response to members of the public asking how they can show their support for TSA agents both at airports, and its organizers said. We're doing this because this affects everyone who travels. This goes across party lines. We want to make sure that we're helping these TSA agents in any way we can, because at the end of the day, you have employees who are working without pay, and that's difficult. We don't know when this is going to end, so we do whatever we can to kind of ease the burden as much as possible, said Kelly Khatib, NFTA Public Information Officer. TSA employees, about 50,000 screening agents, Department of Homeland Security said at least 366 agents have quit. On call-out rates for unscheduled absences have increased since the start of most recent shutdown as Congress is locked in a stalemate over DHS funding. This has sparked long lines and frustrated passengers at various airports across the country, especially during the busy spring break travel season. DHS said the impasse in Congress is creating critical staff shortages, risks to national security, and causing long airport lines. Officials are warning that if the shutdown continues much longer, staffing shortages could force some airports to close entirely. Neither Buffalo Niagara International Airport nor Niagara International Airport is having the same issues with long lines and wait times as other airports across the country, said Khatib. There have been longer lines at the Buffalo airport this week, but they have been caused by other reasons. If people are calling out, it's not in those droves, in those ways that you are seeing across the country. She said right now there's a lot of things that are on at once. We're like having people coming in for March Madness, people coming in for spring break, so we're seeing people traveling at this time, which makes the lines longer. There's no way to really say, no, we're not seeing this because of the issue with TSA, she said. The longest wait clocked in was about 30 minutes, which is normal for high traffic periods, Khatib said. Republicans and Democrats blame each other, the other political party, for the partial shutdown. Democrats support funding specific DHS agencies like TSA, but not Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs under Border Protection because of concerns over aggressive tactics and treatment of migrants. Republicans have blocked what they call piecemeal funding bills, insisting that TSA funding is part of the broader DHS funding package that includes increased funding for ICE and CBP. U.S. Representative Nick Langworthy, Republican of Clarence, announced Wednesday the introduction of Pay TSA Act of 2026, legislation that would ensure TSA offers continue receiving pay at the airport security operations as they remain fully functional during government shutdowns by utilizing the existing 9/11 passenger security fee already paid by airlines travelers. The Pay TSA Act would dedicate revenues from passengers' paid security fee directly to sustaining TSA operations. The public can participate in an NFTA community donation drive from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday by donating gift cards valued at $20 or less. Collected items will be distributed to TSA staff as a token of appreciation to help alleviate financial burdens during the shutdowns, Khatib said. Donations will be accepted at the west end of the airport in the limo lot at the Buffalo International Airport. Now let's go to Ask Eric. Friend struggles to support women in rift with daughter. Dear Eric, one of my oldest friends, Dee, has an 18-year-old daughter, Angie, who recently moved in with her aunt and uncle because she and Dee just could not get along. Dee labeled Angie as depressed, bipolar, lacking empathy, narcissistic, etc. Meanwhile, Angie is a class president, has won full scholarships to college, stars in school musicals, has 2 jobs, no drugs or alcohol or smoking. She excels at almost everything she attempts. Dee is just furious that her daughter doesn't do her laundry on time, doesn't clean her room, make the bed, or won't talk to her. She's harped on it to us constantly for the last 3 years or so. It's escalated to the point that she refuses to talk about anything else. She's forced me to read dozens of pages of emails she sent her daughter where she listed everything wrong she felt that the girl did. It was a ranting tirade that was embarrassing to read and honestly made many of us feel glad Angie was out from under that. Dee has confided to all her friends that she punishes Angie by taking her phone away and then checks her daughter's phone in detail for texts, emails, social media, anything to try to catch her in doing something wrong. Now all that is mother-daughter problems, in my opinion, should be kept within the family. My friends and I are exhausted trying to act like we support our friend Dee. I love Dee and I need a way to let her know we all love her, but think some therapy might help put her in perspective. Or should I back away and let her work it out on her own? Should I do anything or step aside? Family business. Dear family, I don't think this is just a mother-daughter problem. Some of these actions are quite extreme, and I could even be considered emotionally abusive toward Angie. Dee may be struggling mentally and taking it out on Angie. As a friend, it's important not to be neutral here. You've noticed Angie's objectionable behavior and the obsessiveness that is creating problems of all sorts of ways for her. You are also privy to a reality that doesn't match up with her narrative. It's time for tough conversations with her about her actions and the need to get her help. You can say something like, because I love you and care about you, I need to tell you that I'm worried. The way you talk about Angie and the way you treat her really concerns me. It seems dangerous to both of you. Would you please just talk to a professional about the relationship? You can, if you want, be even more blunt. It really sounds like the situation is out of control and Angie is much safer keeping her distance. The kindest thing you can do for Dee is to reflect back some reality to her. It's not unfixable, but she has to change. Dear Eric, I'm a 65-year-old and I have many friends for many years. My 3 best friends have decided to completely cut me out of their lives for some inexplicable reason. I'm devastated and depressed. Should I write to them asking why they did this or let them know what this has done to me? Very Blue. Dear Blue, reaching out to your friends is a good idea. They may not reply, or they may not reply and may not reply in a way that answers the questions their actions bring up. But speaking your mind and being proactive about healing this rift will help your internal process. When you write to them, you may want to lead with I statements such as, I feel confused about what happened to our friendship, but I miss you, and if there's something that I did, I'd like to know what it is. These are 2 examples, and you don't have to prostrate yourself for their approval in your letter. It's also fine to speak your mind in whatever way feels appropriate to your long-standing relationship. What's most important here is that you do what you need to do to avoid feeling powerless. Ghosting a seemingly healthy communicative relationship is rarely a good option, if ever. It certainly doesn't seem to be this way forward here. As you go about this, also try to think about what the outcomes you'd prefer. It's fine for one of those preferred outcomes to be for everything to go back to what it was before, as long as you acknowledge that it may not be possible. Writing your friends is about friendship. Writing to your friends is about your friendship, but it's also perhaps mainly a process that helps you feel a sense of closure. That's going to come from inside rather than from anything they say. You're listening to a reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. The time is 30 minutes after the hour. Now in sports, Pearson has vivid memories of Kopitar. Teams around the NHL are offering their farewell salutes to longtime Kings captain Andrei Kopitar in his final season in the league, with many clubs forming a post-game handshake line with him after their final meeting on the schedule. The Sabres had their matchup against the retiring 38-year-old on Saturday in Los Angeles, and newly acquired winger Tanner Pearson has personal insight on what's behind the respect Kopitar has from players overall. Pearson was acquired by Buffalo at the trade deadline from Winnipeg, was a rookie on the Kings' 2014 Stanley Cup team, and stayed with them for the next 5 seasons. He couldn't be more deserving, I think. So highly of him, both as a guy and a player, Pearson said as we chatted about Kopitar on Thursday in San Jose's SAP Center. And even his family, they took me in while I broke my leg in 2015. So I stayed there after surgery and whatnot. His wife, Enos and Kopi, are 2 of the best people you'll meet. He just had a heck of a career. He's a true leader through and through. Kopitar became the Kings' all-time leading scorer earlier this month, passing Hall of Famer Marcel Dionne with 1,308 career points. Dionne held the franchise record since 1981. In addition to Stanley Cups in 2012 and 14, Kopitar has won 2 Selke trophies for Best Defensive Forward and 3 Lady Byng trophies for gentlemanly play. Incredible player, all the years he's played on both sides of the puck, said Sabres coach Lindy Ruff. You want to talk defensively, you want to talk offensively, you want to talk a guy that's through the face-off circle when he's taking a face-off. I don't know him personally, but he just looks like a heck of a leader. The guy does the right thing every time he puts the equipment on. Kopitar is the greatest player ever produced by Slovenia and is taken by the Kings number 11 overall in 2005, 2 spots before the Sabres grabbed forgettable Slovakian Marek Zagrapan at number 13. Kopitar is the second highest scoring player to Sidney Crosby in the draft class. Zagrapan was the highest player taken from 2005 to never appear in an NHL game. He's so good as a two-way guy. He's played almost like the perfect game, I think, Pearson said of Kopitar. He was responsible in the D zone and produced offensively. Maybe not a 100-point guy, but the way he played the game is probably the most honest you can get. I can still remember him and Getz. Ryan Getzlav would go against each other, 2 heavy hitters, and maybe the best hockey I've ever seen 2 guys play against each other. Definitely a special player. And there's not too many like him anymore. Earlier this season, Kopitar became the 39th player in league history to reach 1,300 points. He entered Saturday with 1,310, 5th on the active list behind Ovechkin, Crosby, Patrick Kane, and Evgeny Malkin. Kopitar had missed just 3 games in total over the last 5 seasons, sat out 15 this year due to a foot injury. With 14 regular season games left in his career, that's 16 points behind Sabre legend Gilbert Perreault at 1326 on the all-time scoring list. Pearson said Kopitar was a huge part of the culture of the 2014 Kings, even though he's still 2 years away from becoming captain. That Los Angeles team won 3 straight 7-game series to reach the Stanley Cup final, including the opening round against San Jose that saw the Kings rally for 4 straight wins to wipe out a 3-0 deficit, the last of which of 4 teams in league history to pull off that feat. The Kings outscored the Sharks 12-2 in the final 3 of that series. The Sun San Jose team that had an 111-point regular season. That team had already won before in 12. So they knew what it took, Pearson said of the Kings. We were down 3-0 against the Sharks and nothing against nothing against them, but there wasn't one of us being discouraged or thinking we're not going to win the series. I was a young guy seeing what other guys were talking about and how they were taking care and going about their business, not feeling that there was a chance. One of the strange points of Kopitar's career is the playoff record from that point. The Kings' 2 championships were sandwiched around a loss to Chicago in 2013 Western Conference Final. Since 2015, there's essentially been nothing. Los Angeles has missed the playoffs 5 times and lost in the first round 6 times, including the last 4 years to Edmonton. Last year's team equaled franchise record with 105 points, but couldn't get past Connor McDavid and company, and things have not been better this year. The Kings entered Saturday's games with an 87-point pace and 1-point leaders in the Turtle Derby, otherwise known as a race for the West last wild card. Pearson, who's only played with 1 game with the Buffalo so far while dealing with an upper body injury, said he's impressed by the Sabres leadership core. It's really been fun to watch. I think everyone that's here has been here a while and has been so hungry for an opportunity to get to the playoffs. He said the leaders here are trying to keep an even keel, not to get too ahead of ourselves with that type of attitude. Gudas remains out for game versus Sabres. Anaheim defenseman Radko Gudas won't play Sunday night against the Sabres at the Honda Center, as Ducks captain will be serving the final game of his 5-game ban for a knee-to-knee hit with Toronto captain Austin Matthews that ended in season for the Leaf captain. Matthews with MCL surgery on the knee on Thursday and faces a 12-week recovery. Just a terribly soft decision by player safety czar George Parros, who danced his way around the issue during a meeting with reporters at last week's general managers meeting in Florida. We evaluate these plays, we look at these plays and not the players. If we determine that the play was worthy of supplemental discipline, when we look at the history of the players involved and if there's an injury or not. This is how we come to make our decisions. We did this and we made the decision under those circumstances, felt that this was the appropriate response, so I stand by it. Truly bizarre. This was clearly, it was clear that this was a severe injury and warranted a much stiffer sentence, especially with the clear knee-to-knee contact by a defenseman that was beaten on the play. Expect players to try to discuss player safety process more over the summer. Penguins Captain Sidney Crosby, who was injured by Gudas at the Olympics, noted the inconsistency of decisions when you consider Gudas got the same number of games that Pittsburgh forward Evgeny Malkin did for a slash on Rasmus Dahlin. It's hard as a player, Crosby told Pittsburgh reporters on Friday. It seems inconsistent. I'm sure they have a process, and I think they stated that. But that process, there seems to be some inconsistencies. I think that's part of it. Crosby essentially agreed with McDavid's feeling from last week that the Edmonton captain wondered if there was ever going to be a suspension. If there's a suspension, everybody complains about it. Why don't we take a look at the process and try to figure out if there's a better way to make sure both parties are happy? Let's take a look at the NCAA tournament in Buffalo. Wolverines pull away from St. Louis in the second half. Michigan flirted with another 100-point game Saturday to sweep its NCAA tournament appearances at KeyBank Center in Buffalo. In the highly anticipated return of Niagara Falls' Roddy Gale Jr. in Western New York, it was a defense from his teammates, specifically 7'3" center Andy Mara. Midwest Region's number 1 seed Michigan defeated number 9 St. Louis 95-72 in the second round. Michigan coach Dusty May said the Wolverines 33-3 clinched the second straight Sweet 16. They'll face the winner of Sunday's number 4 Alabama at number 5 Texas Tech. 23-10 game on Friday at the United Center in Chicago. Mara's defense limited St. Louis center Robbie Avila, the 6'10" Atlantic 10 Player of the Year, to win the game for Michigan. Mara, the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, recorded all 4 of his blocks in the first half and finished with 16 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. Yaxel Landeborg, 6'9" graduate forward, Big Ten Player of the Year, scored 25 points and flushed a one-handed dunk that pleased the crowd. Landeborg shot 3 of 5 from the three-point arc. Sophomore Morez Johnson Jr., a 6'9" forward, added 15 points and 8 rebounds. Johnson shared defensive responsibilities on Avila and blocked his shot to force a first-half shot clock violation. Elliot Cadeau, 12 points, 8 assists. Nimari Burnett, 11. Each made 3 3-pointers on Thursday. Gale scored 14 points. Michigan's 101-80 win over number 16 Howard. The 6'5" guard followed up with 3 points and 6 rebounds on Saturday. St. Louis coach Josh Schertz's Billikens ended the season 29-6. Sophomore guard Amari McCautry scored 14 points. Deion Brown added 10, and their offense centered around Avila, who struggled with 9 points and 5 assists while shooting 3 of 13 from the field. Avila ran St. Louis's offense through double dribble handoffs to set up pick and pop shots and pump faking to open passing lanes. Mara gave Avila a little bit too much space for a 3-pointer that gave St. Louis a 10-7 lead early in the half. Ishan Sharma's free throws gave St. Louis a 27-23 advantage. Michigan closed the first half on a 16-8 run using threes by Cadeau and Vandenborg to take a 48-39 lead into halftime. Avila didn't score again until he made a corner three-pointer to trail Michigan 57-53. Vandenborg's highlight reel dunk over Quentin Jones put the Wolverines up 66-57. The Billikens' Kellen Thames put down a one-handed dunk over Mara, but it came in the midst of a 20-6 Michigan run, in which the Wolverines held a commanding 84-63 lead with less than 7 minutes left. Baby joke. Big Four and Atlantic 10 basketball fans know St. Louis well. The Billikens were ranked at number 24 in the nation when they made 19 three-pointers during a 97-62 win over St. Bonaventure in the Riley Center January 23rd. Bonnet coach Mark Schmidt complimented Avila's game, his court vision, his perimeter offensive game that led to comparison to the Denver Nuggets MVP Nikola Jokic. We call him Baby Joe, St. Louis guard Tim Gray said on Friday. He can pass the ball. Honestly, his IQ level is really high. He knows the game. He can read the game even though he's not the fastest player. He can read it at a fast pace and slows everything down for us. Avila entered Saturday's averaging 12.9 points, 4.1 assists, and 4.6 rebounds after posting 17.3 points, 4 assists, and 6.9 rebounds per game in 24-25. May called Avila the ultimate connector. In golf, Kim doubles lead in Founders Cup. Hyeju Kim doubled her lead to 4 strokes Friday in the Fortinet Founders Cup, capping a late afternoon rally with a 6-foot birdie put on par 3/8. Day after holding out eagle on a par 5 18th hole for a 9 under 63 and a 2-shot lead, Kim, who shot 70 in the afternoon round at a tree-lined Sharon Heights. Gabby Lopez was second at 7 under after a 70 in the morning, and top-ranked Janu Thidikol and Kelly Korda in the group, with top-ranked Canoe Thidikol and Korda in the group on a shot back. Playing the back nine first Friday, Kim bogeyed numbers 11 and 17, then rebounded with birdies on 18, 1, 3, and 8. The golf course is a bit hard, Kim said. The tee shots are hard to play, and the shape of course is a little tricky. The South Korean player, who ranked 8th in the world, won the 2015 Founders Cup in Phoenix for the second of her 7 LPGA Tour titles in 2015. It's been so long, said about the 2015 victories. I think I won my rookie year, and it's an unforgettable memory because it was my first as an LPGA member. Coming off third place finish last month in Thailand, Kim is defending champion next week in Arizona at the Ford Championship at Wild Horse Pass. Lopez from Mexico had 3 front 9 birdies and dropped a stroke on the par 4 16th. The Thidikol rebounded from an opening 72 with 66 in the afternoon. She opened with a bogey and birdied 5 of the next 7. On the back nine, she birdied 12 and 18. You have to be on the fairway first. Cole said, finding the fairway, the rough was rough. Korda, who skipped the Asia swing after winning the season opener in Florida, had a 68 in the morning to get 6 under. She had late birdies on number 7 and 8. It's tricky. You really have to shape it up out there, Korda said. Some of the trees are a little bit intimidating. The greens are tough, too. A lot of things to clean up, I think. But I'm in pretty nice position going into the weekend. Lee said. The tournament began as a tribute to the 13 founders of the LPGA. It began in Arizona in 2011, and last year was the second event of the season and played in Florida. It's attracted 8 of the top 10 players in the world's ranking and kicks off 4 tournament stretch in the West ahead of the first major of the year. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Now let's look at the mailbag by Jay Skursky. Why did Buffalo sign C.J. Gardner-Johnson? Drew S. asks, 7 times the versatile, talented, but volatile safety, C.J. Gardner-Johnson has moved on from teams that employed him, including one team twice. Is this a coincidence, or is he afraid of allergic to stability? Is he just a victim of circumstances, or are there underlying temperamental control issues? Seems like his abrasive style led to common sense and sound reasoning for only signing him to a 1-year contract. What do you think still needs to be accomplished to fortify and improve the interior of the middle of the run defense? Jay, Gardner-Johnson brings with him a reputation for being a handful in the locker room. Clearly, you don't end up on many teams as he has been on without some truth to that idea. What's telling is the Bills being open to the idea of bringing in a player with that reputation. It's fair to wonder if that would have been the case under the old coaching staff. It also shows that new coach Joe Brady respects Gardner-Johnson's talent. Signing him undoubtedly sends a message that there are different things in Buffalo. It remains to be seen if that's a good thing. Brady is well aware that he needs to win big in a hurry. That's something Gardner-Johnson has done throughout his career. Continues in Buffalo. The perceived character risk will be well worth it. As for the run defense, that's an area I thought the Bills should have done more to address in free agency. The team hasn't made any additions at linebacker. Bradley Chubb might help run defense, but he's primarily being paid to rush the passer. It's thought to be a good year for linebackers in the draft, so perhaps Brandon Beane goes that route, and I'd still like to see a starting option added at the position in free agency. Kevin in Pittsford asks, what do you make of the extent of interviews that Brandon Beane and Joe Brady have been doing with national and local media for many weeks, including a lot of podcasts? It strikes me as excessive pushing of narratives at this point, with Beane using it as a forum to make excuses for failed moves or not getting moves done. Is he trying to convince critics that Terry Pegula is right to keep and promote him? Jay, as you alluded to in your question, you're asking a media member about whether Brandon Beane and Brady have been accessible. I'd speak to them every day if I could. My job is to report on the team, and they are 2 of the biggest decision makers in the organization, so I'm never going to criticize them for answering questions or suggest they should do less of it. I'm appreciative that they've been accessible as they have now. Is some of what you theorize possible? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's not a stretch to say reaction to the Bills firing Sean McDermott was mixed at best. A significant portion of Bills' loyal fan base disagree with the decision. It's wise on the part of Beane, who probably took more criticism for the job he did last season than any other point of his tenure, to explain his rationale for the moves, but those that have worked and those that haven't. As for Brady, even though he's been in the organization, people don't truly know him yet. As the offensive coordinator, he was never going to say anything too controversial because he wouldn't want to rock the boat. The toughest questions are reserved for the head coach. That's how it should be. Allowing Brady to show more of his personality is a good thing for the organization. Jeff asks, how do you see us getting, or how will it be before we get out of the negative hole regarding the salary cap? The cap goes up every year, which provides some relief, but it doesn't feel like the time is coming when Beane should do a hard It does feel like the time is coming when Beane should do a hard reset on it. Of course, the easiest way to do it would be to win at all, which would take all of the heat off the front office and basically give them as much rope necessary to get financial house in order. What I mean by that is fans will be so over the moon with the Super Bowl that they likely be willing to suffer some pain in the form of saying goodbye to some players in order to reset the cap. Short of that, it's a tightrope walk for Beane every offseason. He needs to spend money to either retain key free agents or sign them from outside the organization. And there haven't been a lot of money available to spend with Josh Allen in his prime. However, it's not like Beane can punt on a season to get the cap right. At some point, all the money pushed comes due. Off and running, an inside look at Joe Brady's first 2 months as Bills head coach. After dining at a nearby restaurant with possible free agent signing, Joe Brady settled into a leather chair in Brandon Beane's office. Beane, the Bills general manager and president of football operations, wanted to hear Brady's thoughts on their guest that evening, edge rusher Bradley Chubb. The team's pro scouts and coaches knew Chubb would fit the field in Buffalo, but Brady, the Bills' new head coach, and his defensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard, wanted to begin to build a relationship. Impressed by every aspect of their conversation, the Bills decided to see if Chubb was affordable. Beane encouraged Brady to go home. It was already 9:30 p.m. and the head coach did not need to go sit through a tedious negotiation with Chubb's agent. Brady declined. He wanted to learn how a contract is structured and the challenges that can arise as a general manager exchanges dollar figures with an agent. Brady remained in Beane's office past midnight. The two sides slowly built the framework for a 3-year deal Chubb signed a few days later. It's unique, and I loved it, actually, being told the Buffalo News during a wide-ranging interview. Some late nights, but I loved that. Since becoming the Bills' head coach nearly 2 months ago, Brady has virtually no task that's too big or too small. Beane and the pro scouts to identify their targets in free agency to ensure the Bills score more points in 2026. Brady asked his offensive coordinator, Pete Carmichael, and others to analyze the Bills' performance last season. The pace is not slowed amid hiring his staff, attending the scouting combine, and collaborating with Beane to create an offseason plan. Bills' new coach did not take a day off until last Sunday. He doesn't mind the elation he's experienced while standing at the lectern during his introductory press conference was still evident last week as he reflected on 6 players his team had acquired over the process. I hate this time, Brady said, like being with the guys, but no, I'm loving it right now. There is not an element of fun, but it's like really real. On the day he accepted the job, Brady called his defensive players. Josh Allen and everyone else on offense already knew Brady. Brady has celebrated their achievements during games and practices. He pushed them to accomplish more. Some, like outside linebacker Greg Rousseau, had not connected with Brady on the same level, so he got on the phone with as many to communicate his vision and how changes on the defense will lead to different results. After the introductory press conference and media responsibilities, Brady moved swiftly to build a coaching staff. Some of the new assistant coaches previously worked with Brady, like Carmichael and offensive line coach Pat Meyer, 2 assistants, defensive line coach Terrence Jameson, secondary coach Jay Valai, came from college football. The most experienced group, former NFL coach John Fox, got connected to Brady through Beane. The latest hire, assistant quarterbacks coach Trace McSorley, played at Penn State while Brady was a graduate assistant. For Brady, dividing up his day is simple. Each morning revolves around football, whether it's meeting with Carmichael, his offensive staff, to discuss ways to evolve their playbook, and sitting down with Leonhard about his 3-4 defensive scheme. Afternoons are exclusively big picture tasks like preparations for the draft and free agency or something mundane, as where a slogan will be displayed outside One Bills Drive. High energy, very positive energy guy, being said of Brady. I don't know when he sleeps because he's fast twitching. He's on at all times. I have yet to find him without a peep in his step. We haven't played a game, but the staff that he put together has a lot of fresh ideas. There's a lot of different perspectives, and Joe wants to be challenged. He doesn't think he's got all the answers. I think that's the right way to do it, but it's been a lot of positive energy and building fresh, and time will tell as it plays out. Now let's look at the scoreboard in high school basketball, boys basketball. New York State at Visions Veteran Memorial Arena in Binghamton, Class B semifinals Thursday. Number 3 Marcellus 56, Olmsted 31. Class D semifinals, Sackett's Harbor 46, Clymer 37. Girls basketball, North Tonawanda versus Horseheads. This was Saturday. In hockey, Sunday's games, Winnipeg at the Rangers at noon, Colorado at Washington at 12:30, Carolina at Pittsburgh at 3 p.m., Nashville at Chicago at 3 p.m., Columbus at the Islanders at 7 p.m., Vegas at Dallas at 7 p.m., Sabres play Anaheim at 8 p.m., Tampa Bay at Calgary at 8 p.m., and Los Angeles at Utah at 9 p.m. Friday's scores, Carolina Hurricanes 4, Toronto 3. Washington Capitals 2, the Devils 1. Colorado Avalanche 4, Chicago Blackhawks 1. Florida Calgary Flames 4, Florida Panthers 1. Anaheim Ducks 4, Utah Mammoth 1. In the NBA, Sunday's games, Portland at Denver, Brooklyn at Sacramento. Washington will play at New York at 7:30. Minnesota will play at Boston at 8 p.m. Toronto is at Phoenix at 9 p.m. In Friday's scores, Detroit Pistons 115, Golden State Warriors 101. New York Knicks 93, Jersey Nets 92. Houston Rockets 117, Atlanta Hawks 95. The Celtics, Boston Celtics beat the Grizzlies 117 to 112. Portland Trailblazers 108. The Minnesota Timberwolves 104. Denver Nuggets 121. Toronto Raptors 115. Men's NCAA tournament. Tuesday's results, Howard 86, UMBC 83, Texas 68, North Carolina State 66. This is in Dayton. Wednesday's results, Prairie View 67, Lehigh 55, Miami of Ohio 89, SMU is 79. First round Thursday results, TCU 66, Ohio State 64, Duke 71, Siena 65, Louisville 83, South Florida 79, Michigan State 97, North Dakota State 78. Friday, again continuing, St. John 79, North Iowa 53, Kansas 69, Cal Baptist 60, UCLA 75, UCF 71, UConn 82, Furman 71. Second round, Michigan at Louisville on Saturday at 2:45 p.m., Duke at TCU at 5:15. Sunday, San Diego, Kansas at St. John's at 5:15 p.m. Sunday, Philadelphia, UConn at UCLA at 8:45 p.m. Semifinals and finals, March 27th and 29th. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, March 22nd. We read from the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. We broadcast it at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your reader today has been Ron Bickelman.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of Buffalo Magazine. Following that at noon is the Sunday Gusto. And at 1 o'clock is the Sunday front section of the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,